Good evening, everybody. I'm so glad to see all of you here. If you feel as I do, it was ever since we made our season announcement a whole year ago, I've been looking forward to tonight. And to have a Cathy Marston ballet here at Houston Ballet, and to have it based on a play that is so relevant, or so at least locally relevant to who we are. And I've just been very excited to get to know her and her team and the characters a little bit better. If you don't know me, my name is Jen Summers. I'm the director of the Houston Ballet Academy, and on behalf of Stanton Welch, our artistic director, I'd like to welcome you to our Dance Talk series. And tonight we'll be focusing on the world premiere, Cathy Marston Ballet, Summer and Smoke. Before I introduce the panelists, just a reminder to silence your things that make noise. And if you need to go in and out at all, you're surely welcome. Just try to use the doors that are behind you on either side of the seating, just to not disrupt other people. All right, here we go. 3 of the 4 panelists that we have on this with us tonight have never done a dance talk before. So that's very exciting for all of us. You can give them a round of applause now if you would like to. And I'm going to start on my immediate left, and this is Edward Kemp, and I'm going to read, as you know I like to do with bios. Edward Kemp is a dramaturg. We're going to talk more about that. And he has collaborated with Cathy Marston on over 20 ballets. Recent collaborations include Of Mice and Men, Mrs. Robinson, The Cellist, The Suit, Lady Chatterley's Lover, Les Liaisons Dangereuses, and he has also written, so this is a question I have, I know it's not really relevant to tonight, but you worked on a screenplay together?
We did.
For, here.
We did.
We did, but that's another long story.
Okay, so we should table that and talk about it some other time. Got it. It's like and let me just add, a screenplay for Disney Plus. Okay. Oh, yeah, see? In addition to functioning as a dramaturg for Cathy Marston, Edward Kemp has also written text for composers, translated plays, adapted novels, written drama and comedy, and directed plays and musicals in the UK and US. He is Houston Ballet's first dramaturg, to my knowledge. So welcome, Edward Kemp. To his left is Cathy Marston, who is an award-winning choreographer and artistic director. She spent 2 years at the Royal Ballet Upper School before launching a successful international dance career, now spanning over 25 years. She will become director of Ballet Zurich, Switzerland in August 2023. Marston's works have been commissioned and staged for companies such as the Royal Ballet, San Francisco Ballet, American Ballet Theatre, Joffrey Ballet, Houston Ballet, Northern Ballet, English National Ballet, Cuban National Ballet, Danish Royal Ballet, Ballet Black, Le Grand Ballet Canadien, and many more. She has also founded 2 project-based companies, the Cathy Marston Project based in the UK, and Compagnie La Ronde based in Switzerland. Summer and Smoke is her first ballet for Houston Ballet. Please welcome to Cathy Marston. Probably don't need to introduce the next person. Jessica Collado is the Cullen Trust for the Performing Arts principal dancer. She joined the company from the Houston Ballet Academy in 2004. She was promoted to demi-soloist in 2009, soloist in 2011, first soloist in 2013, and principal in 2017. She will be portraying Alma Weinmiller in the world premiere of Summer and Smoke. So welcome to Jessica. And you've all had the opportunity, I imagine, to see Chase O'Connell on Houston Ballet stage, but this is his first dance talk. Chase joined Houston Ballet in 2022 as a principal dancer. Prior to joining the company, he danced with Paris Opera Ballet and moved through the ranks, as Jessica did here at Houston Ballet, at Ballet West. And he will be portraying the role of John Buchanan in Summer and Smoke. So welcome to Chase. So Cathy, we're going to start with you. Based on these bios and also what we've been learning about you as we prepare to see Summer and Smoke, most of your work is inspired by literature. And I wondered sort of why you are drawn to stories, to the stories that you choose, and narrative choreography in general.
So my parents were both English teachers, so I kind of grew up reading books all the time. They took us, my sister and I, to theatre very often. Sometimes to spoken word theatre. We saw the Royal Shakespeare Company, or we'd go to the West End and see musicals and ballet. So they've always been in my life. When I began dancing, you know, I wanted to be everything. I wanted to be Sid Charisse in Singing in the Rain, really. But quite soon I got drawn into the storytelling. And I remember actually, I've mentioned this because I know the connection with Christopher Bruce and Houston Ballet. Quite early on, so I probably was 13 or 14, I did a workshop with Rambert dancers on Christopher Bruce's Swan Song. Do you have that one here? Yeah.
We do. We have it in its original format, and there was an all-female cast as well.
Yeah, it's fact. You'd have been beautiful in that. Did you do that?
I was in the company. I was young.
You would do it again. She'd be great. Anyhow, I did this workshop, and you'll remember there's the chair, and the chair becomes everything from the sort of prison bars to the best friend and all of that. And that, I just remember how that blew my mind, how much you could tell, how much emotion was packed inside that little half an hour with one object on stage. So that was one thing. And then when I began to choreograph at the Royal Ballet School, that was just the way my mind worked. And for years I resisted it, and I tried to do abstract pieces and tried to do narrative pieces. And then I was director of the Bern Ballet for 6 years, and only at the end of my tenure there did I admit to myself that actually I just like telling stories, and that's fine. And so really that's what I focus on now. And even when I make a musical-driven piece, right, by which I mean when the music is the starting point as opposed to the text or the play or the book, even then, my mind just joins those dots and makes stories. I can't make it entirely abstract. I've forgotten what the rest of your question was.
I mean, I think you did a great job with that. How, but a lot of stories have words, and how do you determine which stories are going to work without words? And maybe even the movement is going to enhance that narrative.
Yeah. It's usually, I mean, the things that dance does so well are our inner worlds. So things that are about emotion and relationships. Dance can do this thing where it can say two things at once that I always think words can't. So you can express that you really want to connect with someone with your legs, and at the same time your upper body could say that you're actually really inhibited and you don't want to connect with them at all. And that's something that we use quite a lot in this ballet, this sort of double world that we all live in all the time. You know, it's very rare that you're completely single-minded, straightforward about any given situation. So I'm always looking for those kind of layers in books. I love layers of memory or like dreams versus reality, the imagination versus reality. The things that get tricky are practical things. So we've always talked about Hedda Gabler, and it's just never, it doesn't work because it's about lore and money, and dance doesn't do details like that very well. I mean, Balanchine said you can't say mother-in-law in dance, and you can't. Yeah.
Well, that's actually a really nice transition to my next question, because a lot of the work that you've done are other novels or short stories, and with that, often you get a lot of description of either the environment or the character's internal state. But really, Summer and Smoke is dialogue. It's a play. It's all dialogue. How is the approach in a play? And it really is so much of the dialogue between Alma and John. That's different than what you're describing in terms of the inner character. So how is a play different?
Do you know, I haven't thought about that being different. It's because sometimes I work with novels, sometimes with plays, and sometimes with biographies, which is by far the most complex or big job, because you have to then do a lot of research. Actually, when you take a play, it's already, the story's been condensed to a performable length of time. So it's, a lot of the work is already done. I did a ballet, I was asked to do a ballet on Queen Victoria, for Northern Ballet, and I can't tell you how many doorstoppers of books I had to read, and then working out which bit to focus on was a huge challenge. What I tend to do is do a lot of reading or research, watching films, looking at any relevant material, and then, whether it's any of those things, novel, play, or choreography, distill the research that I've done into lists of words. And sometimes the words might be directly lifted from the text. So actually, Lady Chatterley's Lover was a gift, because there were so many beautiful images in Lawrence's novel that I just find myself sort of taking those three words. But at other times, it's imagining the character and trying to give them words that seem to be appropriate. So can you remember any of your words as Alma? Flutter, or tremble, things like that.
Anxious, nervous.
Yeah, but what I'll tend to do, and I can't remember if I did that to you or to myself, would be, okay, Alma is an anxious person. How does that physically feel when you're anxious? And then you might tremble, or your heart might stop, or you might freeze, or you might jitter, or you might fidget. And I'll list all of those words. So very often the words are coming from me rather than the text. So in a way it doesn't make that much difference, to be honest.
So you have to, when you met this play, you had to decide, I guess ask, what about Summer and Smoke made you know that it was going to be a ballet? Or, and I guess also, did you intentionally, knowing that this was a co-production between Houston Ballet and ABT, pick something that was American, or that would, you know?
It came, so when I was commissioned to make a piece for San Francisco Ballet in 2017-18, it was a lovely opportunity for me to look at American literature, and particularly short stories, which wouldn't probably have been as known in the UK or in Europe. So I was, in that instance, I was drawn to Edith Wharton's novella Ethan Frome. But along the way, I ended up reading a load of Tennessee Williams and various other things, and the Tennessee Williams sort of was still hanging out there in my mind. And ABT asked me to make a long one-act. And that was before the pandemic, and we were planning to do Summer and Smoke, and then the pandemic happened, and Kevin Mackenzie retired, and all of this, and meanwhile Stanton is asking me to make a piece too. And I thought, well, actually, Summer and Smoke would be great in Houston. So I very diplomatically suggested to ABT that it might be a good idea to do a co-production. And everyone thought that was a good idea for all sorts of sensible reasons. And so that's what we did.
So why did you settle on this play? I mean, what about John and Alma made you think this is they're a pas de deux here?
I love that it wasn't one of his really well-known plays, first off. I love the title, second off. But mainly, the aspect of the play which I've actually read criticism about in terms of its existence as a drama piece is that it's very simple and almost too schematic. You've got like these two people, and one's into the body or science, and the other one's into the soul and religion, and they're trying to meet, and basically over the course of the play they swap their positions, and they sort of swerve because they're drawn together, and then it... Sorry, I should have given a spoiler alert, shouldn't I? Anyway, they don't make it, but it's still a good end. So in a way that's almost artificially simple, but then on the other hand, for a ballet, you're kind of looking for that simplicity. There's still a whole, I mean, actually it's not a simple story. There is a kind of tragic turn of events which we have to tell through dance. But I liked...
You're talking about his father's death?
Yeah. But I liked that it was sort of these opposites attract, and the two characters, they're totally expressible in movement. We recognize them, and yet there's so much detail in them that I knew it wasn't going to be boring. Yeah.
Jessica and Chase, do you want to jump in and sort of talk a little bit about who Alma and John are at this point?
Sure. I mean, Cathy said a lot just then. But yes, Alma is this she's the daughter of like the town's reverend, so she's lived a very a life of faith. She has a mother who's, I'd say, maybe mentally unwell, a little kooky, and is a bit of a wild woman, and I think she has to grow up from a young age to take care of her mother, to kind of, you know, they have a little bit of a reverse relationship. So yeah, she's a very kind of down the straight line girl, and I think John is the exact opposite. I think that their attraction between each other is very clear and apparent, and I think the fact that they are complete opposites is also something that draws them to each other. Yeah.
Yeah, I think when I come into the story, I just came back from college, and so I think Jessica's like the girl next door that I always had this flirtation with, and I know that she likes me, and I can take advantage of that a little bit and get her all riled up. And then throughout the story, I kind of see this connection growing, and I can see myself falling for her. And then by the time we kind of get to that point, it just doesn't work out.
So to build, I hear all that, I mean, and to build our understanding of who they are, can you talk, Cathy, a little bit about that process of creating, because she's not, Alma is not Princess Aurora or Odette Odile. I mean, she's really a human with flaws and I think an inner life, but she's also, at least in the play, she's very vocal and challenging, I think. And I mean, she challenges people. She's not completely submissive. So how do you bring her into ballet vocabulary, or the other way around?
So I make these list of words that I was describing, and then the first few days of rehearsal, or even the first week, I can't quite remember, I spend with each character or each group of characters working on a movement vocabulary using those words as kind of prompts. We'll often start by looking at how that character might walk and stand, but what we're looking for are little movement motifs that express all of this range of things. And you're right, I mean, it's tricky with Alma not to make her a victim. I really didn't see her as a victim, and we had to fight that a bit because the words are sort of nervous and twitchy and all of those things. But she has this real arc in the story. So we'll have lists with a list of words for how she is at the beginning, and then how it sort of changes over time. And once you've got these little nuggets of movement material, you can transform them as you're going. So if there's something where she's pushing something away, later, when she opens up, that movement has a story in itself. So you have to think, what does each movement mean? And therefore you can use logic on the movements to progress them throughout the piece.
It almost sounds like an idée fixe, but for a movement. Like it makes me think of a musical motif that you're...
Yeah, a leitmotif, yeah. And interestingly, that Michael, the composer, works a lot with that as well. But another thing, because you mentioned ballet vocabulary, I can't remember if I did that with you two, but sometimes when dancers are less used to this kind of creative process, I'll ask them what ballet steps this character might do. And that's quite easy to do, because you can figure out, well, are they a petit développé, or are they an enveloppé person? Or are they a piqué or a jeté or frappé or a petit battement? And you can kind of answer all of that quite easily once you've talked about the character, right?
Yeah. No, we did that process.
We did that as well, yeah.
Yeah, I've never really worked like that before. It was really like, it made you really understand the character more. She'd be like, okay, what kind of step would you do? You'd be like, okay, an arabesque. She'd be like, okay, like a piqué arabesque, a plie arabesque, an arabesque turn. And so it made you really kind of think how this person would move, how this person would think, how this person would react to things. It was really interesting.
Do you think that was do you use that to decide upon steps, or to get a ballet dancer inside the character, or both? Yeah. Because that's just a different approach. Like, let's not start all up here. Let's start with what you're familiar with. Which pieces of that could we use?
And going back to why I started choreography, when I was at the Royal Ballet School, my favourite thing was in pas de deux class to stand at the side and see what happened when people made a mistake and it fell over, and I always thought it looked more fun.
And you kept those ideas.
Yeah, so ballet steps wonky is one of my favourite things.
Tennessee Williams is, and I think this is true in plays in general, but because there's so many stage directions, but there's some elements of Summer and Smoke where he's like, the sky always needs to be visible. The angel fountain, you know, like it's, how much, since you're not doing the play, how much do you feel that you need to adhere to, which is very much his voice in the author's notes? And maybe you both want to respond to that. How do you either free yourself or feel connected to his intentions?
Hello. Yeah, it's a really interesting because I feel, I mean, it was interesting you talking about dialogue. And actually, as you get more experience as a playwright, as a screenwriter, you learn the last thing you write is the dialogue. The dialogue is actually the kind of very tip of the iceberg. It's everything underneath that actually makes the story work. And to an extent, when we're looking at things, it's what the rest of the iceberg is when you take the top off that is going to make the ballet work or not. And Tennessee Williams has a big old iceberg, which he's constantly referring to, which is what all that other stuff is about. So he will give you really detailed stage directions, and he will tell you what the lighting should be like, and indeed what the music would be like. And you feel like he wants to be Wagner. He wants to kind of create the entire thing, and he's a bit held back before he can put his words on page. And so, I mean, our process, I mean, essentially, I'm always very aware that when I'm working with Cathy, she's the creative artist at the core of this. It's her ballet, inspired by Tennessee Williams, and she's going to be the person standing in a studio with some fantastic dancers trying to make sense of this thing. And all of the work we're doing before that is to try and give a structure that makes that work. And kind of anything that we find can be useful for that. So, yeah, you look at the play, you look at what Tennessee Williams, the kind of tracks he's left behind, and begin to think, oh, why has he done that? And actually, I keep going back to it. I mean, actually went back to, there was one part of it, we did a run through this afternoon, there's one part of it I thought, I still don't quite understand that. And so I did go back to the play. I went back to the play and thought, oh, actually, there's something in the play that we haven't quite done, and it's probably worthwhile learning from that because it will help the next step of the journey. But yeah, he had lots of stage directions, and one of which is about the sky, and one of which is about this angel, who actually, interestingly, was not in our first draft of the scenario. Where the scenario happened kind of pre-COVID and post, or kind of during COVID and then after COVID. I mean, when we went back to it, there was kind of something missing. We went back and we looked at the play is very obsessed with seasons. It goes through the seasons. It tracks the year in a way that we don't quite so much. That wasn't particularly useful to us. But what seemed very useful was his obsession with the angel fountain. Interestingly, there was a big production in London, which was the only time I've seen it on stage, where there was all of his stage directions were completely ignored. There were 7 pianos on stage, that was the set. It was a fantastic production, but there were 7 pianos, that was all you got. So there certainly wasn't an angel. And we sort of got interested in this angel, and it's become, I can't even quite tell you where that idea began, except that it's in Tennessee Williams, and he says it's always there. But trying to find a way of doing that in dance, how you create an angel who is sort of always there, always watching in dance, has led to an extraordinary feature of the ballet, which makes it both very, very true to Tennessee Williams, but also does a thing that he probably couldn't do in a play. And
You explained it's a dancer in our ballet.
I was keeping that back. But it's a dancer. So the solution was to make it a dancer. And then once you do that, make that choice, to make that interesting rather than a dancer just being an angel, you follow through the logic of those choices, and then interesting things begin to happen, which is a lot of what the work's about. So whenever I encounter angels in any pieces, there is a fantastic film called Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders, who I was very excited to learn filmed Paris, Texas, in this very city. Houston became a different thing when I realised Paris, Texas was filmed. But Wings of Desire, which is his next film, it's a German film, is all set in Berlin. And if you haven't seen it, please do see it. Don't see the very bad remake called City of Angels with Nicolas Cage. See the original version, which has the most beautiful depiction of what an angel might be like. And they wander around in long coats. And they can't intervene. They can watch. They can tune into people's thoughts. And they're kind of constantly fascinated by what these human beings are and why we make such strange and odd decisions and do such peculiar things. Because angels are always right. Angels never get anything wrong.
Greek gods would interfere and stir things up, and she doesn't.
Well, angels can't. Angels, they're messengers. And in Wings of Desire, they just watch and they can see what's going on. And for one of them, it becomes very, very frustrating. And so he makes the choice, not to give too much away about Wings of Desire, to change his situation. And encounters some other angels who've done the same thing. And there's a very surprising bit of casting at that point, but I don't want to give that away. But this notion of angels being these watching out, and I think even for those of us who struggle with belief in God or something up there, still often have a very strong sense of the presence of angels, of something out there, something spiritual, something which is watching us. And, we turn to them, want them, and we kind of want them to exist. Or we encounter people, we think, oh, you might be an angel. And so I think that's a kind of easy-ish connection to make. But then what that relationship is to the world, the physical world, becomes very fascinating.
I mean, that sounds like, so you're sort of segueing into, you made this decision about the angel, and then as your role as dramaturg is to help Cathy figure out how that connects to the narrative, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially, so if we tackle this word dramaturg,
you could give us a little context,
do that one?
because
Okay.
you are our first one.
The word dramaturg. So the word dramaturg comes from two Greek words. The Greek word drama, meaning drama, and uragos, which means a maker. And you put the T in the middle because dramaturg would be a hard thing to say. So a dramaturg is simply somebody who understands how dramas are put together. I sometimes describe it as the writer's representative in the rehearsal room when the writer can't be there or there isn't a writer. So somebody who understands how stories in space and time, which is what dramas are, work. And then I kind of lend those skills, which I've honed through working on the writers' plays, adapting novels into plays, translating things, writing opera libretti, all kinds of things, onto, okay, how can we take Tennessee Williams, how can we try and reduce the things you can't do, like mothers-in-law, and focus on the things that you can do, which is the kind of the stuff that Cathy talked about, the kind of emotional pull and push, and put that into a structure where you, the audience, can kind of follow what's going on, and feel sort of safe. That actually you think, oh, this is what the relationship is, this is what's going on between those two, and I will now quite happily watch 5 minutes of a pas de deux, knowing where it fits in the story, knowing that I kind of understand how this thing is taking shape. And so I'm trying all the time to kind of get inside Cathy's head. I mean, I sometimes joke the kind of process we evolve these things through, I sometimes try as dramaturgy, because it's a bit like therapy. And I will often begin the process by saying to her, so you are standing in Houston in 2.5 years' time, choreographing this ballet, Summer and Smoke. What are you doing? What are you working on? Which is trying to understand what is it. Actually,
You're asking her to conceptualize, even before it happens, well, who the characters are.
Well, actually, I'm trying to get her to answer your first question, which is, why do you want to do this piece? What is it in you, Cathy Marston, that needs to express something about the world through this play of Tennessee Williams? Because that's what you'll come and want to watch, and that's what will animate the work. And if we're just doing it because
you ask which bit I can already see,
yeah,
which is really helpful.
And that's also about adapting.
What was the answer when he asked you that?
Well, it was all the pas de deux, really. There's quite a few of them. Yeah. In this instance, it's really about these two. And then actually, that was the first round, and then we added the angel in the second round, and then I could imagine more pas de trois because we brought the angel into the mix. But yeah.
So I want to come back to the angel, and I want to come back to how the dancers, which is not uncommon in help set the scene, help put us in different locations. But I want to talk to Jessica and Chase a little. I would like you to chime in on the process of working with a dramaturg, since I'm assuming you haven't, and how that process, how was that different, or helpful, or any of the things?
I was a little nervous. I feel like he's seen so much acting and he knows exactly what he kind of wants to see out of the story, and so he's very helpful in like those tricky scenes of exactly what I'm trying to portray or what I'm trying to get across, and he was very helpful in those situations.
He would sometimes come up to us and ask us questions like, why did you make that choice? And I immediately was so self-conscious, like it was the wrong choice, the wrong idea. But not that at all, and I think it was more of an effort of me further understanding Alma's motives and why she's making the decisions that she's making. And he would either say that, yes, I totally agree, maybe you face the front so it's more visible. I think he helped find those moments that push the story along, that the audience needs to make sure that they see, to find the arc of the whole story as a whole.
And do you think that's...
I often don't know is the answer. That actually, all I do is I watch and I think, I don't understand this moment. And so I'll go and ask the person who's embodying that moment, what are you doing?
And I get really self-conscious.
But it's a genuine question, because I don't know. And actually that's the way you find out. That's the way you watch and you think, actually, I don't understand what's going on there. So I want to know what the answer to that question is, because as a member of the audience, there are things you won't understand. I mean, I'm a great believer in not all bits of work being explicable. But to try and reduce that down to things that have to be inexplicable because they're about the human heart is part of my job.
So it sounds like you have two different roles. You have the original role in the process of bringing I want to choreograph To Summer and Smoke into reality, but then also coming later in the process and being us, helping for people who who haven't been inside the process with like the way Cathy and the dancers have been, to get that sort of, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I'm not understanding. It would help me if.
Can I ask a question to these two?
Yeah.
Because, sorry. So we've made this piece in 3 blocks. We had 4 weeks in September, October, and then 2 weeks in January, and now just before the premiere I've come back. And I have to say, they keep doing magic while I'm away, because every time I come back, and I know they haven't had rehearsals, and I know they're secretly rehearsing, because it gets so much better each time. And I would love to know, have you talked about the story together, or do you just do it independently? How have you done that together?
There was a period in January where we did get together on our layoff time, just to make sure that we had all the material in our bodies and that it was kind of seamless and got the mechanics in order before you came back the second time, so we could push forward and not get stuck on the stuff we had done already. As far as storyline, I think we've had some part of rehearsals where we, have candid conversations with each other as to maybe who's the motivator, or, I think also time has helped everything sink and settle and become a little bit more clear.
And I also feel like just you're very easy to act with and dance with, and I kind of feel like I can see your intentions behind stuff, and it brings other intentions out of me. So I feel like every time there's like little things that we do something different that bring it to another level.
You mean figuring out who that you're sort of in the process of bringing the piece to life? You're continually figuring out who they are, and you're becoming them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They are, and maybe that's why it works, because they haven't talked to each other about it. Maybe that's why it feels more real. No, I'm thinking about it. I know.
Allowing the discovery to be there.
Yeah, because you don't discuss an interaction before you have it, I suppose. So, yeah.
Can we go back to the angel? And so to be clear, which I don't know if you have read it, but in the play, it is a set piece.
It's a stone angel, so
Like a fountain, right?
yeah, there's a sort of town square where a lot of the action takes place, and in the town square there's a fountain, and there's a stone angel in the fountain who has cupped hands, and the water of the fountain comes out of her hands. And Tennessee Williams specifically says that this angel should be always on stage, even if the scene takes place in one of their houses. You should see the angel somewhere on the stage in the distance.
And so that set piece became a dancer, and I did hear, before we started to talk about developing their characters, you were mentioning that they're a pas de trois with Alma, John, and the angel. So while she's not, or she are not, they're not interfering with the trajectory of the story.
Well,
they're definitely present in it.
They can't, but they're in it. They're watching it, and at some moments would quite like to interfere with the story. I mean, they're kind of our eyes. That's often in the early conversations with Ed, I'll really need to find out from whose perspective am I looking at a specific story. And sometimes it might be one of the characters, one of the main characters, or it might be a chorus of people. And in this case, it's the angel. So it's almost like she's not exactly a narrator, somewhere between a narrator and an observer, and she's taking us into their story. And she's not neutral about it. She wants something.
We know what she wants, and we know we know what her intentions are.
Mm.
Can you two talk about how the angel intersects with you and what that feels like?
I'd say she follows Alma maybe a little bit more than John. We do have that little pas de trois together, which is interesting because it's like you're dancing with a ghost almost, like somebody that you're not supposed to see, but still is triggering movement in a way, so everything kind of has an action-reaction. And I think it's really clever the way that trio turned out. But yeah, I kind of feel like the angel is, I don't know, like my conscience a little bit with her chorus, that she puts into movement the things that are happening in my head, or my thoughts, my emotions, my troubles. She expands on that and makes that maybe more visible for the viewer.
So that you can, at the same time, continue to be truly Alma, who wouldn't be as expressive. Is that?
Maybe. Yeah.
She's like the confidant.
Yeah.
So in the play, Alma goes to this angel every day. It's to pray maybe, or to just confide in her. So I think the angel has an attachment to Alma and wants the best for her and wants Alma's problems to be resolved. And so I think she accompanies Alma. I think that's the best thing, which I suppose is what angels do. Well, don't they?
So what other, in general in the play, you're in the town square or in the rectory or in the doctor's office or the casino. Obviously, we're not going to have, well, not obviously, but you don't have huge sets coming in and out and in between. Seems to me, and I haven't seen it, but I've seen the cast list, which is much, much bigger than the cast list in the Williams play. Other than the angel, how are you using the dancers to help us understand where we are?
Well, there's a load of people who are the people of the town, neighbors, younger, older, party goers, Bible class goers. They give context to the story of Alma and John. And then there's 6 dancers who, in the rehearsals, we're calling the angel chorus. I think we've decided to call, what have we called them in the program?
I think angel ensemble.
Angel ensemble. It was tricky to find the right word because it sounds very clunky, and they're the opposite of clunky because they're her wings. So she's standing there and there's this fountain, and it's like she's got 3 dancers on either side of her that are as if, she doesn't have wings in her costume. So if she moves like that, there's 3 dancers that kind of move like that with her, and another 3 on this side. And she, using her wings, can shift scenes. So if she's had enough of listening to or seeing John flirt with Rose, another character, she'll sweep them off stage and move on to the next bit.
It's like she's, well, the word that was popping in my head is like an MC for the, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Can we talk a little, so we talked a little bit about how Ed is in your process. You have other collaborators as well, composer and designer. Can you talk a little bit about whether it's pre-COVID or during COVID or post, how that all intersected and came to be?
So the process goes, I get a commission, I think, ooh, I want to do Summer and Smoke for this. Usually I'll have a few calls with Ed about that as well.
I say, that's a terrible idea, why don't you do that? And then get persuaded.
Yeah, so we'll have a chat, and then we'll start writing the scenario, so we'll discuss all of the things that Ed described, and then we create a sort of dance script that's all the scenes with timings on it. And then meanwhile, I would have asked a specific composer to come on board, and I'll start working with them on the score using this script. And likewise with the designer. And usually I do that. It's always a bit complicated to have everyone on board, so I usually lead those conversations. And in this case, Michael Dougherty, the composer, was someone who I'd been listening to his music for some time. I knew he was very drawn to particularly American ideas, themes, stories, characters. And we met in Chicago when I was there working with Joffrey Ballet, and he loved the idea of doing Summer and Smoke. And it's been really fun working with him. I had, for quite a long period of time, weekly Zooms, and we would go through, the next phase of the next scene, and he always wanted me to talk it through with him, so he's set with his next 5 or 6 minutes to create for that week. And we work in very similar ways, so he also develops leitmotifs for each character, or like John's a clarinet, there's quite a sort of slippery, kind of playful clarinet theme thing that's John's idea, whereas there's much more, the Alma and the Angel have this sort of very clear melody that's it's kind of almost religious or spiritual, I would say. And then Mrs. Weinmiller, her slightly mad mum, has music that's a little bit more sort of wonky again. So anyway, he'll develop these different musical ideas, and once you've got a few, then they logically come back. So if we know that the surgery that John works in scene 2 has this kind of musical idea, then when it repeats in scene 10, we can bring that and repeat that, but develop it in some way, because there'll usually be some sort of transformation that has happened.
But you're driving the, I heard you say timings, so he knows that in scene 3 it's going to be John and Rose and,
yeah.
and XYZ, so that those...
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's going to be 2.5 minutes. The challenge for a composer is that our scenarios tend to be quite short, so each scene, like most parodies, are about 3 minutes. A solo, maybe a couple of minutes, a group scene, not more than 5. They're all quite short chunks for a classical composer who usually would work in larger sweeps. So that's one of the challenges for the composer, is to not make it sound like an iTunes playlist. So that's the work with the composer, and meanwhile I'm working with Patrick Kinmouth, who has designed the set and costumes. This is the 4th ballet that Patrick and I have made together. We did Jane Eyre and Snowblind, the Ethan Frome piece, and Mrs. Robinson. And what I like about Patrick is he's British, but he's worked a lot in Europe and also in America. So I live in Switzerland, and there's a very different aesthetic between British theatre and European theatre. British theatre traditionally is more realistic and sort of follows the playwright, the writer's direction, whereas particularly German theatre is completely led by the director, and if the director's not interested in the length of a skirt, then chop it off. Or like, you know, it's the director takes what they want to take from the piece rather than feeling like they need to do exactly what the writer said. And I've really got both of those attitudes have fed my work in a way that I really enjoy. I became a lot braver with the decisions that I make creatively, having lived in Switzerland, which is German-speaking Switzerland, for so long. And Patrick understands both. So while we're trying to tell a story that has characters, that has human characters, so we need to see dresses, that's got a certain period, but we both agree that if that period dress is going to hide the body and we're not going to see all of this very detailed movement that I've created, what's the point? It's not a costume parade. So we'll work with fabrics that will reveal the vocabulary in the body. You can see here, but still the detail in this little ruching at the top or the waistband and so on, it doesn't feel contemporary. It's still got a character and a slight reference to the time there, but it's not swamping the choreography. And likewise with the set, we're looking for a balance between something that evokes certain spaces but doesn't literally give them to you on stage. So we're asking you as an audience to use your imagination and lean in and kind of take a leap into our world, rather than the version where you sit back and there's a sign that comes on and says casino and flashing lights, and then it's you're not going to get that.
We need room to dance, so I mean that's helpful. Okay, it is the time for me to turn it over to you. As a reminder, if you've got a question, give me just a minute to repeat the question just so that everybody hears it before our panelists answer. Who would like to go first? Yes, sir.
You mentioned the composer. Is there any time that during the rehearsals or the practice that you say, the music's not right, but I want to change it, particularly maybe from the dancer?
So the question's back to the composer. Is there once he's written the score, is there room for movement, changing it once you're actually in the studio with the dancers?
I have to say he's been amazing, yes. He's been really flexible, not in enormous ways, but sometimes, I did ask for another minute for you quite near the beginning.
I think with traveling salesman.
And with the traveling, so he actually came to rehearsals for a few days, and it was perfect because there's the end of the ballet, there's a duet with Alma and a traveling salesman, which you'll have to read the play or see the ballet. I won't explain that now. But we needed more time, and he, on the spot, was in dialogue with Catherine, the pianist, and they added some repeats and did a little twiddle here and there, and lo and behold, we had another 45 seconds, which was really helpful. On the other hand, sometimes you might want to just nip something in a little bit because it's just a little too long. So he's been great, and I have to say, Catherine is amazing, really. She's
Kathy's talking about Catherine Siscon, our principal pianist, which I see a lot of head nodding.
Really fabulous. I haven't worked with someone like that before. And I came in because often with new music, you kind of want to work with a demo because you can hear the orchestration and it's just sometimes a little easier. And she said, oh, I'll just come and sit in. And she was sat there and she'd be like, we'd be sort of sketching something out and she'd quietly be playing it, not intrusively. And then I said, okay, could you take it from there again, Catherine? And she'll But she's been super helpful. She's very on everything and comes to me at the end of rehearsal. I just have a question. And she'll have been paying so close attention to the choreography and won't let me get away with anything.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah.
So, you talked about having the scene script. How much of the choreography is done beforehand? How much is done in collaboration with the dancers? This kind of
Great. That's a wonderful question. So the questions that you described having a scene-by-scene script, more or less. What about choreography? How much is prepared ahead of time? How much are you building with the dancers?
None of it is prepared ahead of time. Yeah, all with the dancers.
I think that's what has made this process so fulfilling, is that it's been collaborative from the start, and it all happens in the studio with each other, with all of our minds working together. Yeah.
Piggyback on that.
Yeah.
Is that, do you attribute that to more of a female sensibility of a choreographer, or do you have a feminine, masculine take on?
So the question is Cathy's approach inherently a feminine one? Or, yeah, do you have an answer to that?
Gosh, I don't think I do really. It's just the way I am. I mean, as a person, as a leader, as a choreographer, I have quite a coaching style, so I'd rather draw out of people what is there and work together on something. When I was younger, I might have shown a bit more. In my 20s, Chase would have been in the room, I probably would have climbed on him more than I have. Be fun. But no, I mean, these days, I mean, there's so much that I couldn't possibly think of showing that they could do. So it's much better. And if I'm really clear about the intentions that I want, then that's what it's about the inside coming out rather than a phrase and then adding emotional content to a phrase.
Yeah, it was really interesting. Like, she'd be like, hey, you're going to go touch Alma. And so I go touch her shoulder. And she's like, oh, no, it's too aggressive. I go to touch her hand. She's like, oh, no, it's too loving. So you're like trying to think of what she wants.
You knew it when you saw it.
Yeah, you find it together.
Yeah.
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 I heard you say that this is a co-production. So how much different work do you have to do with the other company when you get to that point?
So the question's about the fact that this is a co-production with ABT, and you want to take that? I mean,
sure. I mean, honestly, it doesn't make a huge difference. This company have created the ballet. Luckily, I did work with ABT before, so I have the dancers a little bit in my head, and I could, it was there. I can imagine how it might work with the principals that I want to cast in New York. But co-productions take lots of different shapes and forms, and sometimes it's just really practical. And in this case, Houston Ballet could provide the time and space and dancers and production department and everything that a creation requires. So in the autumn, Sarah Van Patten, who's my choreographic assistant, who's been working with us, will go and start teaching. And actually, 2 of the ballet staff here will also go for a couple of weeks each and help do that as well, which is really nice. And then I'll go to add final details, I guess.
do you think you'll change it at all? Because it'll have different dancers?
I don't think we'll have time. I mean, different companies have different possibilities, and ABT have a very tight schedule. So I have to admit, I'm quite relieved that the creative process has been here. It would be nice, I mean, I'm about to, as you mentioned, start directing the Zurich Ballet Zurich in Switzerland, and we will do a collaboration with Joffrey Ballet. And in that case, I want to start, I'm going to have a couple of weeks with Joffrey Ballet first, and then I'll create the bulk of the material with Ballet Zurich and then go back a bit. So we're trying to make that more of a circular experience. But sometimes it's just practical. And I think what's been such a pleasure working here at Houston is it's so tangible that you really feel it's a choreographer-led company. You just feel, I mean, I've been going around to lots of different places, and you feel in the room that all of the dancers are totally fine with the creative process, which can mean that you spend quite a long time making something and then it doesn't work the next day, and you chuck it out and you try again, or you say, I mean, gosh, that Bible scene we've done about 5 times. There's one particular scene, and I've had it with chairs, without chairs, on this side of the stage. I mean, they've really been very open to trying out things. And that sounds so obvious, but it's not always the case.
And just to, I mean, as a kind of an occasional visitor, I've really noticed that actually there are companies that I drop in and I think, oh God, we're struggling uphill here. it's been extraordinary. I mean, I saw it back at 5 weeks ago with the run through this afternoon. You think, gosh, they really are inside this material in a very particular kind of way, in a very special way. So there's something very healthy happening.
I think with those of us who were around and talking a lot around our 50th anniversary season, and if you haven't had a chance to walk up our stairwell and see the installation that we did celebrating the company's 50 years, it really has always been, for the majority of the time the company's been a company, it's been a choreographer-led a choreographer-led company, which then means, as Stanton likes to say, that historically and into the present, we want this to feel like a choreographer's Eden. The choreographers can come and have the dancers that they need, and the costume shop that they need, and supportive musicians that they need.
That really is the case. You do feel it. And it's inspiring for me as a choreographer, because those companies are quite rare these days, because the job of a director expands so much. And well, I mean, now of course Julie Kent is coming to support that, which is wonderful. But it's inspiring to me as I'm about to take on a company as a choreographer that I will keep in mind. Like, how was it in Houston? What were the good things about that I can replicate or develop?
Yeah.
Will there be more than one cast? I would think this is a singular experience for all of you.
So the question is there more than one cast of Summer and Smoke?
Yeah. There is. I love that. I mean, it's a scary thing for a choreographer sometimes, because if you get too sort of tunnel vision on one couple or one particular cast, then it can be quite painful to let go of that. But over the years, I've realized that it's much richer if you really include right from the beginning the room, and I think we've really done that, particularly with Connor and Karina, who will be the other cast of these two. They've been very present, and I've got 2 eyes.
Yeah, I feel like from the very beginning we had 4 couples in the room, and she was working with different people every day, and so at some point you're like, am I doing this ballet? Is it? You kind of guess. But I mean, she was great. I mean, everyone had a little bit of input, everyone had their say, everyone got to be seen, so it was really nice to see that.
You and Connor have been really lovely together, I have to say. You kind of exchanged quite a lot.
Yeah.
Which is nice. And the tricky thing for Connor is that I wanted him also in the first cast because he's such a wonderful artist. So he became also the doctor, so his dad. So Connor is a bit of a sort of split personality. He has to be his dad and then also learn the steps that Chase is doing. So challenging.
What time period is this set in?
Sharon's asking about the time period.
We are before the First World War, is really all Tennessee Williams leads us to believe, and we've sort of more or less kept to that. So I think we're probably sort of 1910-ish, I'd have said, roughly.
We have time for one more.
I had a statement. It's not fair when you have more than one cast, because it means we have to see the
Yes, that is true. So that when you have more than one, but we've, as you've heard, you heard just 2 weeks ago when we were talking about Romeo and Juliet. You know, everybody. I mean, that's the amazing thing about live dance, and versus the spoken word. All of us, if we picked up a copy of Summer and Smoke, would see the exact same words, the exact same artist note from Tennessee Williams. But when you see somebody physically interpreting it, even if the steps are the same, you're going to have a different experience. And I think yes, it does mean 2 sets of tickets, but it does also mean, you know, a rich experience.
And coming from theatre, it's a really lovely one. I mean, it's so lovely because bodies are so different, and you learn so much about a character, and you will sometimes think, actually, there's something that dancer innately has, which that dancer could learn from. And in theatre, that tends to happen kind of, you know, you do the play with the original cast, and then the next cast have to inherit it. And if you're reviving a play or putting a new cast in, you're kind of trying to fight against some completely other person, whereas this feels much more organic, and it's very exciting and richer. But you have to come and see it twice.
Yeah, there we go. And you have that opportunity beginning next week. Thank you all for coming out tonight, and thank you to our wonderful panelists.